Hawkers? What's going on, Hawkers? What's going on, Hawkers? What's going on, Hawkers?
Got one life, live it.
What's going on, Hawkers? What's going on, Hawkers? What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Backpacking Podcast. As always, I'm here with my good friend, Jeremiah Stringer. Buddy, you got one life, live it. How's it going?
Hi, my name is Jeremiah Stringer, and I like to podcast.
What's going on, Hawkers?
Listen to John with the soundboard, man.
I'd say something really funny that just happened.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, whenever we start the countdown, I always like go use the bathroom real quick.
Yeah.
Because we don't know how long we're going to be on here for sometimes.
Yeah.
And so if you don't get it out, you're going to be dancing by the end of this thing, right?
Yeah.
So especially when you're old, you know, because I'm old now. So anyways, I run to the kitchen, I go to the bathroom. I don't pee in the kitchen. That would be really, my wife would be very unhappy with me. So I go to the bathroom and I come back through the kitchen. I go to grab a cheese stick, you know, because I'm doing this keto thing. So like my snacks are like cheese basically.
Yeah.
So I grab one and it's soaking wet.
Gross.
And so
dude.
I'm like, what is that? So I put it back. I grab another one, come back in here. And I can smell my hands right now. We had scallops last week. And I think the bag leaked down into the basket that had all the cheese sticks in it. And now my hand smells like old scallops. It's disgusting, dude.
Dude, you got scallopy cheese.
Oh, it's terrible, man. It's terrible. Well, luckily, I mean, they're wrapped. It's hermetically sealed. So, you know, I'm good to go.
Oh, okay.
But my hand, dude, my hand smells like scallops. It's disgusting. It's like the worst thing in the world. But we got to keep the show going.
Yeah.
Scallopy hands or not, we're going to keep this show going. That's all I'm going to say. So we already got the guys out here already. Look at this, man. There's so many comments. We just got started. Holy cow. We have an awesome guest tonight, man.
Oh, I love this guy.
We have an awesome guest. He's a guy you've backpacked with before on multiple occasions. Am I right about that?
Yeah, we've done a few things here and there. We've done a little trail in Ohio and to do a meetup. We've done some Red River Gorge, Smith and Out at Eagle's Nest, and Jason almost killed his dog. And then most recently, we went to Land Between the Lakes. We've had a great time, man.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I know that when I first met Dan Becker, he told me that his YouTube hero was this guy. And he did. That's what he told me that. Like, that's legit. He told me this. And he said, you've got to check out his photography. And I did. And oh my gosh, we're going to show some of this later in the show. But ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome to the live stream tonight, Mr. David Gray. How are you, sir?
Hey guys, I can't hear.
Can you hear
Whatever
us now?
great intro you gave me, I couldn't hear it, so I don't know what's going on.
Oh,
Can you hear us now?
sorry.
Can you hear us now?
No, I heard the whole intro, but I'm not hearing any sound now. Sorry.
Oh no.
Oh, I'm sorry, David. Here, why don't I do
Can I
this?
leave and come back in?
Yeah.
Yeah, do that.
Hang on, I'll be right back.
Okay.
I want to hear that intro again.
David.
So did I mention my hands smell like scallops? It's really gross, dude.
Man. Hey,
It's
why
so
are you
gross.
doing that? Is it okay if I give a shout out for a DM I got earlier today about the podcast?
Please do, man. Please do.
Okay. So one thing I love is whenever we get these emails, or sometimes like on my Facebook, I have a Facebook for my YouTube channel and an Instagram for my YouTube channel. And this guy, his name is Ed, and his Instagram handle is Tales from the North Country. He sent me a few messages and some pictures from his trip and said, love the podcast, guys. And that he named specific episodes that he's listening to. And he said, I actually used 3 of your episodes to work through 20.8 miles of road walking today.
That's
so
awesome.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Shout
That's
out.
Awesome.
Shout out.
That's
to
great,
Ed.
man.
Tales from the North Country.
All right, man. It's time for take number 2.
I'm back.
Mr. David Gray.
And
Can
I
you hear
can
us
hear
now?
you. I don't know what happened. I heard the
Beautiful.
whole intro up until when you guys started talking. So I'm sorry about that.
Well, we were just talking about this old no-name guy named Dan Becker and how you're his YouTube hero.
I like Dan. Have you guys done one of these with Dan?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We did one a while back with him. I mean, it's not going to be nearly as popular as this one, but
Yeah, right.
Oh yeah, David. I was just saying, John's like, you've been backpacking with David a few times. I know that you and John don't know each other from the trail, but you and I think the first time that we met was at the Ohio YouTube meetup, which I still don't know if those meetups are a secret or not. I think they're kind of.
I thought it was like a cult thing. It felt kind of like a cult thing.
Yeah.
Actually, it felt kind of like a frat party, just like the Land Between the Lakes, which was kind of a rerun of that.
Yeah, it's like a less people, but definitely the same vibe. But
I just remember I was sitting next to you at the fire and everybody was telling stories and you were doing this, the whole time. And I thought you had like epilepsy or something. And I'm going, oh man, because I hadn't met anybody on that trip at all, and I knew everybody from YouTube, but I had never met anybody personally. And so I'd seen some of your videos, but I had never met you. And then you're doing this and I'm going, man, I didn't know Jeremiah. I'll need to talk to him about that later. And you were shaking up your hand warmers because I saw you doing the same thing in the Land Between the Lakes. So now anytime I ever see anybody doing that, it's like, my first thought is going to be they're going with the hand warmers instead of anything else. So.
It's not Tourette syndrome.
Yeah, but I remember, and you'll even see it if you watch my video of that, because I was filming when you were telling some story, and you were doing that the whole time, and it was just like, wow, it's kind of, I don't know if I should include this in the video. The guy's got a disability or something. So. So sorry, that was my first thought of you, Jeremiah. But I've gotten to know you better since then. So.
Jeremiah and his disabilities.
Yeah,
they're many. I will tell you that. So we got some comments for you already, David. So go ahead and throw these up here for you to see.
I can't see the comment. Okay.
Yeah, David has some great weather for his hike in Alabama.
Oh, yeah, we did. Yeah, and somewhere in that video, I go, now this is my idea of winter backpacking. Not that Land Between the Lakes, getting down to like 20 degrees and you almost freeze to death. So no, it was beautiful weather, man. It's the one thing I'd wanted to hike down there forever. It was in the Talladega National Forest, the Chia Wilderness, and there's a number of different options for trails down there. But man, for like a early season hike, if you wanted to do something in January, February, March, or even late season, when normally I wouldn't, because until like the last couple of years, I've actually done quite a bit more winter backpacking, and I'm really glad I did last year because the whole COVID thing really shut down. I don't know about you guys, but it pretty much shut down the whole real backpacking season because you just couldn't. Everything was just too weird, and I ended up getting in like 3 winter hikes last year, and I'm so glad that I did. And those were my first 3 winter hikes that I ever did. And so I wouldn't say I'm necessarily a convert on it. I do not like being cold backpacking, and I sweat a lot. And so like no matter what the temperatures are, so it could be like 20, 30 degrees and everything will be soaked. And then when you stop hiking and your body heat kind of cools down, and it just like
Oh, it's miserable.
A new experience. Yes, I don't like being cold, but yeah, I do like getting the season extended a little bit, so it's a good option for that.
Well,
It's
I went
beautiful,
down.
beautiful area too, man.
Yeah, I went down in November. We did part of the Pinhoti Trail up through there.
Yeah,
And
that's
it
we
seems
did
like
a stretch.
yeah, so like every 20 yards was another view. It was just
Yeah.
unbelievable. I couldn't get over it. I didn't know that was in Alabama. So
Oh yeah, I didn't either.
that was
Well,
pretty awesome.
and the early season when you don't have the foliage on the trees, it's like normally I think if it was like middle of summer you wouldn't get those kind of views, but this time of year and maybe later in the year when the leaves fall off the trees, it's really spectacular. No, I love it. Love the area.
See, when I went down in November, there were tons of blowdowns. Did you have a ton of that? Did you have a lot of blowdowns when you were there?
We did. Yeah, we did in certain stretches. And I think you got to expect that anytime you probably get out early season, just from everything that happens over the winter. They just haven't gotten out and cleaned it up. But there were a couple stretches, I think, that had some tornado damage either from this year or earlier. And somebody had gotten out in there and done some maintenance because we were up on top, the ridge. And it was pretty narrow. There wasn't really any kind of, other than the trail, there wasn't any place to walk. And so if somebody hadn't cleaned that out, that would have just been a mess to try to get through.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We had a couple spots. Couldn't even see the trail. It was so bad. But you were talking about Jeremy earlier from All Things Outdoors. So what's up, guys? One of the best dudes to share the trail with.
So, I paid Jeremy to say that. So he could go on the Dolly Sods trip with us.
Wait. You can get paid to say nice things about you, dude. I'll say nice things about you all day long.
Oh
man.
Yeah.
I'm easily bought.
It's in the budget. Yeah.
We got another one that says the first backpacking videos I ever watched was Mr. David Gray. His stuff is the best. I'm just gonna go through a few of these because you're getting a bunch of love right now. Just watched the new Alabama video before coming here. 25 watching, only 6 thumbs up. Come on, gang, smash that thumbs up button. That's right, people, smash that thumbs up button.
I like that.
It's 2021. David, I thank you for being a huge part of me starting my rookie year of backpacking. You were way influential to me way before these other two clowns.
That hurts, man.
There it is. So just wanted to get you some love there as we got started here. I want to make sure that you get to see some. There's a lot more, but we'll get to this in a little bit.
So I want to ask you, since you were mentioning winter trips, myself, I think I showed up late, but backpacking with Jason.
Yeah. The off trail trip to the gorge.
Yeah. I think Jeremy and
you didn't just show up late. You showed up in the middle of the night in the dark in a snowstorm when we couldn't find the trail in the daytime. And I still talk to people about that. Was one of the most amazing things I had ever experienced was the fact you ever found us. And I know some of it at the end involved us screaming down to you and you screaming back up to us, which was a little weird, but it all worked out in the end. Man, that was an epic night.
Well, I had to reach a high point so that I could have enough cell phone service to call you guys.
Yeah, that was a good night.
I didn't know anything about where to go, but I wanted to ask you if you would tell us about how Mr. Backpacking with Jason, sir, almost murdered your dog on that trip.
Right here it is.
Well,
see a shirt.
Backpacking with Dad right here for the whole world to see. There we go.
No, and before I answer that, Jason loves my dogs probably as much as I do, especially Jaden. Jaden's the old one, and but on that trip it was all off trail, and there really weren't. There were a lot of down trees, and Jaden's back legs. He's 15-year-old lab, and his back legs are lush. And so we were having to help him up constantly over these trees. And then on top of that, found out later, Jaden was not feeling well that night, and temperatures got down. We got a couple inches of snow, whatever it was. So it was a true winter backpacking trip. And Jaden was just kind of shaken by the fire, wasn't feeling well. And we ended up bailing a day early, heading out. And I found out later he had a real badly abscessed tooth. So he was just, and he is, if you've watched any of my videos, he's been around since the beginning. And man, that dog is a trooper. He lives to be out on the trail, and he'll never let me down. So he did what he had to do to make it through that trip. And then I took him to the vet and found out, man, he was really hurting. He was in some bad shape on that trip. but yeah, then Jason, next time he saw him was on Land Between the Lakes, and he was loving all over him. So it was Jaden loves it.
That's great. So somebody wanted you to know that you got them through the COVID lockdown. No joke.
Binge watching David Gray videos, probably.
There you go. There you go.
That's what I
Glad you
did too.
through.
I like. Well, that's kind of where it all started. You know, I didn't do back in the days when I started all of this. YouTube was really like Flickr for sharing pictures with your family and stuff. I mean, it wasn't for doing any of the stuff we do on it now. And so I was using YouTube at the time to like record my trips or whatever and share them with my dad, my sister, whoever. So it was really more of a family thing. And so I could, because I did all these trips when I was growing up. My dad was a college professor, and we would go on these like 2-month camping trips out west. He didn't have a lot of money, but he had a lot of time. And so we would pack up the old station wagon, the Woody station wagon, what is it? Vacation, Chevy Chase Vacation.
Yeah.
We had one of those, and we would we would start driving, and we would camp in the old national park campgrounds that were $5 a night. And back in those days, they were never full. You just pull in, you'd find some camp spot, and that's what we would do for like 8 weeks at a time. And so it was, it to me, it was just like living a dream, and my brother, but I never had any memories from it. I had nothing. There's nothing I can look back on other than maybe a few pictures I might be able to find, which I don't have. So I wanted to have something that we could share with the kids and for me, that I could remember the trips by. So that's kind of how it all started, is just something that I could record the trips and share them with the family and share them with myself. And then, and those early trips in the middle of the winter, I live in Indiana. So the middle of the winter, you're not doing a whole lot other than sitting inside. I would pull up the videos, and I'd be watching the mountain trips from out west. And so I think some people do the same thing, but I do the same thing too. I love looking. I go back to some of those, my favorite trips, and watch them over and over and over again. They're my favorite thing to do, is relive some of that stuff.
Speaking of that, somebody on here said they did your Smoky Mountain Little River Trail hike when we doing the CDT Grand Lake trip in August. Thank you for all you do in informative trips. So question, you did the Little River Trail hike.
Yeah.
It's like 7 miles, 6-7 miles up to that
Tyler,
campsite.
Yeah. Yep.
That campsite is awesome. Like,
yeah,
I did that one in September. It was either August or September. And I was telling somebody, I always, when I go to Smokies, I want to see a payoff, because, you're in the mountains. And the payoff on that place is the campsite. It's you're just surrounded by all these different forks of the river and everything. And I mean, it's just awesome. So I didn't know you did that one. I have to go find that.
Now you started doing these YouTube videos, and obviously the more you do, the better you get at not only getting the footage, but also editing the footage. And
that's for sure.
Am I right that you went back and took some of your older footage and have remastered and re-edited that?
Yeah. I call them like what do the kids call it? The hashtag TBT, throwback time videos. I don't know all this hashtag stuff, but so I kind of got in it with that. But yeah, it was, well, one of the things that had always bothered me were the older videos that I had done. And there were some good ones. There were some Western trips in there, but back in the early days of YouTube, my channel, and I don't know what the rules are nowadays, but it was limited to like 15-minute uploads. And you couldn't, I don't even know if they had high definition capability back then. I mean, I started doing those things back in like 2010. And so some of the earliest videos were just horrific to look at, but I recorded everything in full HD. So I had all of this like original footage, and it just always bugged me. These things were out there. So I always had this plan in mind to go back to some of those earlier videos, and my editing skills were pretty bad. I mean, I wouldn't say they're fantastic now, but they've improved over time. And so I wanted to go back to some of the earlier videos and redo them, to make them as good as I could possibly make them. And plus the early camera I used, it was what was it called? It was like a Panasonic. It was one of the earliest HD cameras from like 2005, 2006. And it was like a Panasonic, what was it? SD9, HD SD9 or something it was called. And it had horrible image stabilization. I don't even know if it had optical image stabilization. So I would record these things, and the camera was like shaking like, well, they got offboard image stabilization now. So I wanted to go back and apply some image stabilization, improve the audio, improve the editing. And so I've done that on, I don't know how many I've done, probably 4 or 5 of them, and like a Western trip or some of the early trips. And it always bothered me that people, the more the videos, the recent videos became more and more popular, people would go back and look at the older ones, and they were like embarrassing. So I started this whole series of the new ones, and I'll continue that with some of them, is just to get through until I got to the point. I think the first one that I did with what I would call a real camera was like the 2014 Glacier trip, and even that one I don't think I recorded at the full HD upload. I just didn't think that way back then. Yeah, a long ways, because now it's like full 4K. You're doing stuff and uploading in 4K, and I mean, these recent, and some of that stuff, like the one I think that did a Yellowstone trip and a couple years ago, and Wind River Range, and man, it just shows if you watch those on a full 4K TV, I mean, it's just incredible. Some of that scenery and the lighting and the mountains and everything with the 4K. So it's worth it. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it.
Well, I was going to say, I want to show people some of what you do besides just doing video, because people need to see the photography that you do. So I'm going to pull up some pictures if that's okay with you.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's good.
So people can see these.
Yeah. If you're listening, if you're listening to the recorded episode on your podcast platform, you go to
you're not going to see this
channel. Yeah. You need to go to the YouTube channel, Backpacking Podcast on YouTube. Yes. So that you can see this. I mean, these are insane. Like this first one. Tell us about this first picture.
It's a picture it was taken actually from the parking lot of what's that?
Did you say Klingman's Dome?
Klingman's Dome. Yeah, I was drawing a blank there. Klingman's Dome in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And this actually was taken after I finished the hike from the parking lot, which is also like the trailhead up there. And the clouds were streaming over the top of the mountain, which you can kind of see on the right side of the picture. And it was like literally just flying at 30, 40, 50 miles an hour over the top of this mountain. And so every few seconds you would get a different kind of shot. And this was actually kind of looking out over the mountains. It was just a spectacular scene. And it was late in the year. I think I did this hike in October. And so you were just getting some of the early full fall colors coming through, which you can kind of see amongst the evergreens here on the top. And the lighting was pretty harsh. It was actually, I took this as what's called an HDR picture. So it was at that time, I can't remember which camera I was using at that time, but it was a compilation of multiple exposures. And then you combine them on the computer, so it gives the picture a more natural look, like what your eye sees. But some of these pictures from the top up there were just unbelievable. It was a rough hike. It didn't work out as planned. I hadn't done my planning in advance, so a lesson to anybody who wants to hike down the Great Smoky Mountains National Park is do your planning in advance, because you will not get a briefing from a ranger. You get your permits online. And I didn't realize many of the trails that I needed to hike on this trip were going to be closed. And so I had to bail early. And I actually got back to my car through a shuttle service. I think I bailed to the Elkmont campground, which was about, a full hour plus drive away from where my car was. And then I had to figure out how to get back to the car. There's no cell phone coverage, by the way, in Elkmont campground. So I was lucky. I found the little park kiosk, and I mean, it was literally some lady that had a cash register and was selling, like 3 little counters full of stuff. And she had a landline phone. Who has a landline phone anymore? Yeah. Wow. And a phone book. So it was like, when's the last time you went digging through the yellow pages of a phone book to try to find a shuttle service? But so I'm calling shuttle service after shuttle service, and most of them would come out, and then finally some lady said, yeah, I'll come and get you, for $120 or whatever. And it was the best $120 I ever spent in my life. And I was so happy when I took that picture. I had made it back to my car. I had survived the trip. And it was literally one of those trips you don't say, hey, I successfully completed it. It was literally, I survived this trip. And I was pretty glad to be up there. And then I was greeted by that scene with that picture. So it was pretty impressive.
That's awesome. We got another picture here. Jeremiah, if you want to pull this one up real quick.
Yeah, for sure.
Let us know where this one was.
This is Glacier National Park. This is Lake McDonald Lake, Lake McDonald, I guess it is. And for anybody who's ever been out to Glacier, this is the scene that's always there. I've done 3 glacier trips, and I've probably done another 3 or 4 like car camping trips or drive trips through there. And this is the same scene that's always there. Probably a little different. A couple things have changed it. They got some invasive species in that lake, so they got a little wigged out about letting anybody kind of go boating in there anymore. But you could rent these boats and kind of run around in the lake. And this was the morning of before we started our hike. This was in 2014. We did the North Fork area with my son Christian, and we were starting out of Bowman Lake. And you always stop in Apgar Village, and there's like a little restaurant there that you can get, your basic like standard breakfast that I like to have: scrambled eggs and hash browns and bacon. And then you walk over to the lake, and there's this beach there and this dock area. And every single time I've ever been to that spot, the lighting is different. Everything is different about it. Last time I was there were forest fires in the background, but the lighting, the sun was just kind of coming up over the mountains. The view was like looking straight east. And that was also another HDR shot, because I was kind of taking it right into the sun. But it was, just a spectacular scene. And the thing is, you kind of get used to seeing stuff like that in Glacier. It's pretty typical scene in Glacier in the early mornings.
Now, how do you decide how to compose those shots?
Well, I'm a fan of, the old Kodak rule of thirds kind of thing. It's like you divide your picture. I'm kind of an old school Ansel Adams guy. I mean, I've been doing photography going all the way back to the 70s. I was getting paid for photography when I was in high school and college. Back in the days, I had a dark room. I had an apartment in college back in the 70s, and I had a dark room in my apartment, and I was doing photography for the college.
Wow.
The old
way back. Well, I'll tell you, the backpacking came way later. The video came way later, but the photography is kind of where it all started from. So it's really, the rule of thirds that always stuck with me. There were old, I think this all came out of like some old Kodak books where it was just like the basics of composition and all that. And it just had basic rules of diagonals kind of running to draw the viewer into your scenes, and having your main subjects not be in the center of your picture, but it being in one of the third corners or whatever. And I've just always followed that stuck with me from back in the time when I was a teenager. So it's kind of a natural thing. And then when I take the picture, and typically when I take pictures, I typically use, and I think that picture was taken with a 20 millimeter lens, which is my standard lens that I take on trips now, both for video and photography. And I leave extra room around it so that when especially nowadays with these cameras that are like, I think the camera I take, the Nikon D810, which is my primary still photography camera, that I use as a 36 megapixel camera. So it's just this ginormous, it gives you this enormous canvas to work on. You don't have to worry about trying to crop it at the scene. So I leave myself plenty of room to do stuff with it later when I come back to the computer and work on it here to compose it the way that I want.
Well, here's another one that I think looks incredible. This is
this was in the Holy Cross, or I'm sorry, this was in the Collegiate Peaks Wilderness. That is Mount Yale in the background. That storm, the highest point that you see there in the background, kind of left of center, is Mount Yale. It's a 14er, and this is at Hartenstein Lake, which is about a mile. Think of Hartenstein Lake kind of going off on a cul-de-sac about a mile uphill from the main trail. So it doesn't I don't think a lot of people head over there, but it's just a spectacular lake. The real popular lake in that area is Cranky Lake, and you go over Browns Pass to get to it on the Continental Divide Trail. And I was on a hike with my son Christian on this trip. And so we found this campsite on Hartenstein Lake, and we were just sitting there in camp. And this was in August in Colorado, and anybody who's hiked in August in Colorado gets to see this scene quite a bit because every afternoon you're going to get thunderstorms building up. And where you don't want to be when something like that rolls in is on the top of Mount Yale in the background.
Right.
And if you've ever been in Colorado, I know you have Jeremiah's, you get these thunderstorms building up in the afternoon, and if you're above tree line when it kind of rolls in, it makes you feel really small.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you realize how fragile a human being can be in a thunderstorm in the mountains. But so we sat there in our camp and we had this fire going, and it was just a really, really nice scene. And we just sat and watched this thunderstorm develop gradually over time. And that's the only picture I think I really put out. I don't know where you guys are getting these pictures from, probably Instagram.
Yeah.
But what you don't see is the series of shots that I took, and they're probably in the YouTube video I did, as you see it kind of gradually literally exploding, because it developed so quickly. And then you saw the lightning and the thunder. You could hear the thunder from it was moving in the opposite direction. So the cool thing about that one was we knew it wasn't coming towards us. So we're sitting at this fire at this beautiful campsite on this lake in the mountains, all to ourselves. There was nobody else within miles of us, probably. And we're just sitting on this log, enjoying this fire, just watching what I call nature TV in front of us. And literally, we didn't hike to take that picture. That picture just kind of like happened in front of us. And it gradually developed from almost a blue sky, or just your normal puffy white cloud sky, which is kind of what can happen in Colorado in August.
I'm sure that it's a lot easier now because you can waste as many shots as you want.
Oh yeah, it's all free.
Yeah, so take as many as you want, and then I assume you use Lightroom to edit.
Yeah, I use Lightroom almost for everything now. I mean, Lightroom has gotten so good that you'd almost every once in a while I'll have to pull up Photoshop or something to do something. And then a lot of the pictures I take are HDR pictures, just because I've found, and I try to make them as natural as possible. I mean, you can do some real goofy ass stuff with HDR pictures, which I don't, and even that picture of Glacier, the picture you guys pulled up of Glacier was a little bit more of a stylized picture.
Yeah.
But I liked that look because it matched what my eye saw from that picture. But the one from Hartenstein Lake is an HDR picture. But nowadays I like to make them as natural as I possibly can. But to me, they match. If you almost have to look at it in comparison to the standard exposure images. But to me, they match more what your eye, because your brain has the ability to fill in, to expand the kind of the dynamic range of light that your digital camera cannot do. Now nowadays, by the way, cameras are getting much better at that. Yeah. But in some of the earlier digital cameras I had, it just didn't have the dynamic range to match what your eye was seeing. So I used a lot of HDR just to kind of make it more natural for what I remember the scene looking like.
Yeah, well, we got another one too. We got a bunch of these pictures, man. These are
geez.
we can do these things.
This is great, man.
Nice.
I've never spent time kind of looking at photography. This is great. I always talk about backpacking or gear or videos or whatever. So photography is cool. This is the Wind River Range. And this was Marms Lake, I believe it was. This was our first trip to the Wind River Range. And we knew going in, I had always wanted to go to the Wind River Range forever. I was a little bit intimidated. It's the same way I kind of sort of feel about desert trips, because I'm not that knowledgeable of the area or whatever. But I got lucky in that I was able to meet up with, done a lot of trips with Travis, and Travis had done a ton of trips in the Wind River Range, and he knows this area like the back of his hand. And so, we said, hey, let's go and do the winds. And the problem is that Travis works in the NFL. And so his hiking season ends about the first week in July. Well, that's
wow.
For some of these Western trips, you really, if you've never done any Western trips, you really want to be thinking more late July into August, because, as much as I'm from the Midwest and we think of the 4th of July like the middle of the summer, I've learned that it can be like, and you have too, Jeremiah, early trips in the mountains can be like wintertime still. And I learned that on my first trip to one of my first trips to Colorado, where we went up to the Zirkle Wilderness on the 4th of July, and there was still 4 feet of snow on the entire area of the trail. Well, so this was an early season trip. It was late June in the winds, and we had wanted to do either the circuit, the two really popular hikes there, to head out to Island Lake and the Titcomb Basin, which is in the northern area of the winds, or the Cirque of Towers, it's called, which is more kind of in the southern area of the winds. And so our primary plan was to go out to the Island Lake, which is the trip that Carl and I actually did the year later. What was that, 2019? Carl and I actually made that trip out to Island Lake. But when we showed up in, what's the name of the town in? I can't even remember, in Wyoming. I'll think of it in a second. Where the Log Cabin Motel, Pinedale. So we showed up in Pinedale, and you head to the local outfitter there. There's a local outfitter that's the source of all knowledge. And we walked in, and he said, it was a kind of an older guy sitting there. He goes, "Never be able to do that hike, guys." He says, there's a lake there. You got to kind of hike right along the edge of a lake. And he said that trail's under like 3 feet of water. And having now done that hike, I know exactly the spot that he's talking about, because it's kind of like more like sheer cliffs, and the whole trail was underwater. And so we kind of immediately changed our plans to the hike that we ended up doing, which was kind of out to Dad's Lake and Marm's Lake, in that area, if you're familiar with the winds. Well, the problem is that the snow had really just melted, and so the mosquitoes were out in force. This was the mosquito trip. So that shot, as beautiful as it is,
somebody actually commented on that on the thing already.
Yeah,
They already said mosquitoes.
But what you can't picture is like the reason we chose the camp spots we did on that hike, which were like there were campsites you would never ever choose in a million years on a normal hike, but our whole mindset had changed, because the second you stopped anywhere, you were swarmed by mosquitoes, even when you were hiking. And so we found these campsites that were totally exposed, which is like where that picture was taken from, was actually from our campsite. And the wind was just like constant. And as long as the wind was up, like 15 miles an hour, there were no mosquitoes. But the second it stopped, when it died down at night, well, at night, at least we had a fire. And so that kind of kept the mosquitoes away a little bit. But in the morning, when there was no fire, or when you had to go to the bathroom in the woods, that was an experience.
Pooping and having mosquitoes eat you up.
Oh yeah, it was the best, man.
Oh yeah, sounds like it's awesome.
But what it did do is, no matter any place I've been, like when we did Yellowstone in 2019, and we had one campsite that was really a ton of mosquitoes. But it's always the saying is, hey, these are nowhere near as bad as the winds. I mean, you're getting totally swarmed, which would normally be like 100 times worse than anything you're used to. And it's like, hey, this isn't half as bad as the winds. So it's the trip that set the bar for mosquitoes, at least.
Whenever I was on the long trail, it wasn't mosquitoes. It was those freaking the black
flies. Oh, they're worse.
I hate black flies.
There were some mosquitoes. I haven't done a black fly trip yet, and I hope never to, but they're nasty.
I'm going up to Michigan. We're doing pictured rocks, and I've heard if you're not careful, sometimes you can catch those black flies up there. So we're hoping. We're going in May, so we're not sure if it's going to be bad by that point or not, but we'll see what happens.
Shouldn't be in May. Yeah, it's usually a later summer thing.
Oh, I would actually have to. I went to Vermont in summer, like end of May, July, pooping in mosquitoes. Yeah, Doc Watson knows. It was so bad, man. And like there's privies everywhere, but a lot of the privies were just 3 walls on a platform, so you see all those. But I remember I would stop and take like a break and try to eat a snack, and you would have to take your pants and tuck them into your socks. If you're wearing shorts, just forget about it. Tuck your pants into the socks, tuck your long sleeves into gloves, and put on the bug head net. I don't know if you use those.
Oh yeah. Well, and as a matter of fact, as bad as that video was, and for the mosquitoes and how bad the bugs were, we didn't even think about wearing shorts. And my pants were treated with permethrin. So somebody had turned me on to that stuff. And I had a wind jacket on, and everything was treated in permethrin. And then we had the bug net, and so you would, it was kind of creepy because you just hear this constant buzzing sound and all that. But you kind of got used to it after a while, I think. Except it was bad, but they weren't really biting you as bad as you might think, because we had all of these clothes on that were treated, so it actually worked out pretty well.
Okay, so we're to the last picture. but this one
Okay,
is the one that touches my heart the most. So
Okay.
this is the one that means the most to me.
You
So I
guys are
gotta put this up
surprising me
here.
with all these. So, oh,
Miguel's Pizza, man, Red
yeah.
River Gorge.
Oh, you hit me with Miguel's at the end.
Yes.
Yeah, for anybody who's ever been to the Red River Gorge, you either know about Miguel's or you should know about Miguel's. But this is an iconic place, and I remember the first time I did the Red River Gorge, and I can't even remember what it was, like 2012, and I had done some research in advance. And, everybody talked about, of course, you got to make the obligatory trip to Miguel's. And I didn't know what Miguel's was. So I'm driving around it's just me and Jaden that year. And it was pretty early in my backpacking career. So this was one of my early trips. And I'm just driving around kind of exploring the area. And I come upon this, and it was just, there's nothing out there. And then all of a sudden I round this bend. And back then, it's different nowadays, but back then it was just this building. And then they had this huge field out back of it, and the field was entirely filled with tents.
Yep.
This was probably in April. I think it was in April. And I see these and it just struck me because it was like, man, I am in the middle of nowhere, and here's like 200 tents. And I came upon this parking lot, and the parking lot was just packed with like hundreds of cars. And I go, this has got to be Miguel's. And so I pull in the parking lot, and I see this site. This was back in 2012 was the first time I was there. And it was like, oh man, this is Miguel's. And it reminded, and I'm walking around with a camera, and it's all these college kids. It reminded me of like Woodstock is what it really reminded me of. And everybody's looking at me funny, and I walk around with a camera a lot. I've done a lot of crazy things with the camera, filming people, but I've never had people look at me like I'm some kind of like narc or a cop or something. And so I really felt like awkward filming anybody. So I kind of put the camera away because they're giving me these dirty looks like, hey man, who's this cop walking around taking pictures of us? But they're all kind of out doing all these kids doing their things, and they're dressed like Woodstock. They were all rock climbers. That's like the big mecca for the rock climbers, and they just hang out there. And back in those days, it was all in a tent. And then Miguel's would have breakfast burritos in the morning for them. So they would feed them, and they had just incredible pizza. And it's the place, my pizza had always been growing up, and to this day, it was always ham, bacon, and pepperoni. And so that's what ham, bacon, and pepper. So I walk in Miguel's and I order a ham, bacon, and pepperoni pizza. And they say, well, what's your fourth ingredient? And I go, no, I just want ham, bacon, and pepperoni. And they go, well, it's the same price. If you've ever been to Miguel's, it's the craziest thing ever. They charge you one price for cheese. Then they charge you another price for 2 ingredients, and another price for 4 ingredients, another price for 6 and 8. So the price of whether you get 3 or 4 ingredients, it's the same. And I'm like, well, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. And I think it's still that way to today. It's just the crazy. So I go, well, what do you suggest? And they go, oh, we make a killer handmade chorizo. And I'm like,
they do.
Oh yeah.
Oh, so that was what turned me on to chorizo. I had never even thought about chorizo on a pizza. Now, if I ever find a place that's got ham, bacon, pepperoni, and chorizo, and there is a place, I live in Carmel, Indiana. There is a place locally here that does that, and they make their own chorizo too. The crust isn't nearly as good as Miguel's, but that was, and on top of that, so I go, what kind of beers do you guys have? This is 2012. It's different now, but 2012, they go, that's a dry county. And I go, it's a dry county. And they were all walking around with their Ale 8s. I'd never seen Ale 8. Everybody's got bottles of Ale 8, refundable bottles, the kind that you don't throw away. You get your 5-cent deposit back. And I go, you guys don't, I gotta have, this was like after I had hiked all day, and I hadn't backpacked that particular year. We were kind of exploring it. So I had a campground at Coomer Ridge Campground, and we had a camp. It was me and Jaden were going to share our pizza. And I'd set up a camp. So I'd gone down to Miguel's to get the pizza, and I go, I gotta have beer. And they go, well, you can go just up to the county line at the beer trailer. And I'm like, oh, okay, beer trailer. So I'm thinking like some Winnebago, some dude selling like 6 packs of beer across the county line. And so I go driving up the road, and I can't find the beer trailer. And I drove, she said it was about a mile up the road. So I drive about 4 miles up the road. There's no beer trailer. So I go back to Miguel's, and I go, I couldn't find the beer trailer. And she goes, "Oh, you can't miss it. It's like there's flags all over the place and everything." And so I keep driving, and I finally find this place that's got all those flags kind of hanging out that flutter in the wind and all that. And it wasn't a trailer, it was just ginormous. But I bought our beer for the night, and Jaden and I went back to Coomer Ridge Campground and shared that pizza. And I didn't give Jaden the beer, but I did give him a little bit of the pizza. Anyways, it's kind of a long story to explain the Miguel's picture, isn't it?
Well,
but that Miguel's picture was just taken recently, so it's a little different now.
My first trip to Miguel's was in the 90s. I was in college in Eastern Kentucky, and we came out to the gorge. These guys were like, "You have to come check out the gorge." And I was like, I'm from Ohio at the time, and I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about. And we got to Miguel's afterwards, and I mean, now we're talking almost a 30-year relationship with Miguel's for me. So
mine's
man,
shorter, but it's totally different now. I mean, they've literally turned it into like a, almost like a hostel type place. They have a big building out there where everybody stays, and it's more of a built up structure out there.
Oh, and the inside looks like a restaurant now. It doesn't look like a bunch of bus seats.
I think they've made it bigger too than the first time I was there. I think they've expanded it out the back, so it's they've done a good business, and rightly so. It's you got, if you're ever in the gorge, you got to go there.
Yep. Yeah, I think David, I have to ask you. We're big on hitting the hard hitting questions.
Okay.
On
I can see that
on this podcast, and so everybody wants to know this. This is kind of that unicorn thing, like where people just don't know how it's possible. But why does your hair always look perfect?
Well,
like you look at any of your trip videos, it seems like your hair is always perfect, and it's just like, how does this guy pull that off?
Well, if you look at the last trip video, many of the comments have been about my bedhead hair the second day, because my hair, it's kind of slicked down here. I actually took a shower, but I wanted to clean up for you guys. So it's actually kind of a little bit wet and everything, but it's a little longer than it normally is because of the whole COVID thing. I haven't been going and getting it cut as often as I normally would. And I usually would keep it kind of short for trips so it wouldn't look too gnarly. But on this last trip, it was kind of long, and I had this just epic mohawk thing going on the second day, from like the day of trail grime and sweat and dirt and everything. So it's almost like gel and trail gel in your hair, and then they're tossing and turning all night long. So actually, people have, you mentioned that, but people have made the comment on this last video that I had like the epic trail hair going on the second day. So not always like that.
What's the deal with the green buff?
That is, I don't remember when I got that, but it's a merino wool buff. Actually, Buff is the brand, and they make a million different styles of that kind of thing. Most of them are like in a polyester material, but I really wanted something that was wool, that I could use in various ways. And back in the day, they sold an army green one. So I go, okay, that sounds like cool. And so I use it like for temperature regulation, mostly, because it's just kind of a thin layer of wool. And the cool thing is that you can also double it up, if you want it to be a little bit warmer, or you can use it to wipe things down, or as a neck warmer. You can make it into like a gaiter kind of thing if you want. But it's just unbelievably versatile. And so I've always used that thing. But I remember somebody out there has my original green one, my cherished original green one with all the holes that I had earned over time. I lost it at the the Ohio YouTube meetup group thing, November of 2019. So somebody out there has my original, but I remembered, and they don't.
$50 says it was restless. $50 says it was restless.
Probably it was, but the thing is, they don't make that color anymore. They don't make that original army green color. So I ended up buying a replacement for it, but they call it like the spruce color, which is more of a bluish green type color. But then I remembered I'd actually bought a second one for my son in the original army green, and he never liked it. He never used it. And so I found that in like you're buried deep in your bins that you've got out in your storage thing. So I actually have the original, my second version of the original army green one I still have. But yeah, that's nice. It's just an unbelievably versatile thing for temperature regulation, so I can put it on real quick, or I can double it up, or I can flip it around if it gets all sweaty. You can do all kinds of things with it. You can filter water through it if you got real nasty water.
Apparently SBO fanboys stole it.
That's what I was going to say. I said everything I have that either Kevin or Andy are wearing that right now. They both might be at the same time. I'm not sure. Just like one person did. One person did.
Probably find it on eBay sometime.
They're gonna do another one of those gear giveaways on their live stream, and you're gonna see we've got David Gray's original buff right here.
I'll buy it from him.
John, you weren't at that meetup, David. I remember David was looking around for that thing, and
oh yeah,
poor guy. He was so.
Well, I had it when I showed up, and then later on, it's like, where is that thing? And then I couldn't find it. And you never find it. You can't ever find it. And this was like November, and all the leaves are down off the trees. There's like no chance of ever finding it.
Yeah, he left in a panic, man. Just my green buff, and his go-to is just plop it on the head. You don't do the beanie.
No,
you don't do like the bandana style where you tuck it over itself.
It's just dangling out back. So
that's awesome. Awesome.
It's going in the breeze, whatever it's gonna do.
We got a camera nerd question for you.
Okay.
Our buddy Hunter, he wants to know, what Nikon lens did you get to replace the one you broke on the LBL trip?
Hunter, I got that lens replaced or repaired. So I haven't replaced it. It was the one for got an earbud thing here. For people that didn't watch that, I had a lens. I use now a Nikon Z6 camera, both for the video and the still pictures, and I use a 24 millimeter Z lens, which goes with it. And on that trip, and it's a incredibly abusive environment for photography equipment when you're backpacking. I can't tell you how many times I've dropped things or things have fallen over. Well, that night, for anybody who's watched the video, that was kind of an epic night. And I kind of let my hair down a little bit, so to speak, tried to keep up with the young kids, which was in hindsight probably a grave mistake. But somehow or another, I think my camera ended up on the ground a couple times. And the net result of that is that second day when we were hiking, I'm walking along and I noticed my lens had turned into a two-piece lens. It literally broke in half. And I'm like, I don't think it's supposed to do that. The front and the back had separated. I don't know what it was. And the amazing thing was it still worked. But I didn't trust it. So I ended up filming the last part of that trip actually with my iPhone, which really worked remarkably well with 4K video. I was really impressed by it. But Hunter was on the trip, and he knows that the lens broke. So I sent it into Nikon. I only bought that thing less than a year ago, so I was hoping they would cover it under repair, which they originally did. And then they sent me back a thing, said, oh, by the way, we've noticed there's some impact damage on this thing. It's not covered by warranty. So it cost me a little bit of coin to get it fixed. And I'll answer his question because I did use a different lens on the Alabama trip because I didn't have it back yet. But they sent it back to me, like, just absolutely miraculously, like 3 or 4 days before that Alabama trip, they sent it back to me. And I was so happy because I never expected it to come in time, and it didn't work. I put it on my lens, and all it did was I turned the camera on and it would say lens error, and it wouldn't recognize the lens was even there. It would make all these funny noises. And I was, so I was hoping it was something on my part, that I maybe a firmware update or something I had to do. No luck. I had to send it back in for repair a second time. And I did get it back, and it does work perfectly. So it'll be on the next trip. But in the meantime, before when I originally got the Nikon Z6, I didn't have any Z lenses. There were hardly any of them out. And so they make what's called a FTZ adapter, which is an F mount to a Z mount adapter. And I have a ton of old lenses. So on this Alabama trip, I actually used my 20 millimeter F mount lens with the F to Z adapter. But if you ever look at the original trip I did with the Z6, which was, the Z6 is a phenomenal camera, but it's a hell of a learning experience to dial it in, how to work it. And I used it the first time on my first trip in 2019. And I didn't, the problem with using those F mount lenses is with an external microphone. I use a Rode Stereo Video Mic Pro microphone. It picks up everything. I mean, it's unbelievably sensitive microphone, and those F-mount lenses have a lot of focus motor noise, and you'll even notice it a couple times on the Alabama trip. I've learned since that I have to put it in manual mode and focus it manually, so it doesn't try to focus automatically. But if you leave it in automatic focus mode, just constantly you hear this from the focus motor trying constantly, you know, even though it's in focus, it's trying to just adjust it perfectly, and the noise gets picked up by the microphone. So it's the 20 millimeter F-mount lens is a fantastic lens with that, but you really, you know, it's a little bit of a high maintenance thing. You got to focus it manually, and I forgot a few times.
Yeah. There was a guy actually who, Watts Wildlife said, hey guys, I go to Murray State University 30 minutes from LBO. And believe it or not, I was in the same Pixel Bay the same morning you all, not 300 yards from your camp photographing eagles.
Yeah, he was.
Small world.
I think he was over. I think he was over by the boat ramp that was right across the way from where we were camped.
It's
Crazy.
Yeah, it's well, and yeah, there were people. I mean, that night there was boats going by, and they were doing some stuff with the Asian carp. You know, it was a lot of stuff going on that night.
Yeah, and the ice was waking me up. The lake literally freezing.
Yeah.
And then cracking and waking.
Yeah, that's the first time I've gone down to the water source, and I had to break myself a hole in there in the water to find a way to get water in the morning. And then I don't know if you did this, Jeremiah, that morning. There was like only one spot where you could go out there and get water where there were rocks and stuff. And I'm getting water out of the lake, and there's like a dead carp, like a dead fish, like 4 inches away from where I was collecting the water. It's like, oh man, gotta go find a new spot. I don't want carp tasting water.
Timmy had one of those like pump, like you could pump the filter, and then it's got a hose so you can fill up like multiple bottles. Dude,
yeah, that was one of those spots that would have been great for a filter pump like that.
Yeah, there were still dead fish. For those that don't know, like Kentucky Lake and Lake Barkley are on each side of LBL, and there's Asian carp getting in there, and they're super invasive. And so they had a boat out there with a giant fishing net trying to get rid of as many as possible. They're doing a lot of work out there. Epic trip though.
Now, okay, so the Asian carp, are those the ones where if they put
the ones that jump?
Yeah, and they go flying on, like smack people in the head.
Well, they get agitated and they jump out of the water. So you can imagine you can't like do any, you know, if they get bad enough in the lake, you can't do any water skiing or anything. Because they'll just nail you. Yeah, they're nasty. Well, I've seen videos where they're catching them by like doing something to agitate them, and they jump right in the boat. Yeah, that's the Asian carp.
So we have a request, Jeremiah. People are wanting you to do the Poop Hammock review at some point.
So I was going to ask David. So
that was a Poop Hammock review.
David, what did you think about the Poop Hammock that I brought?
That was that was awesome. I don't know that I would use it necessarily for its intended purpose, but I was thinking even for a place to sit down on the trail, like if you stopped and you wanted to, you know, just there's so many places I've gone where I'm not taking my camp chair and there's no place to sit, no sitting logs or whatever. It would just be awesome just to kind of take a load off.
Yeah, definitely take a load off. That thing does double duty.
It does.
It's two kinds of loads.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was the first time I'd ever seen that. I was impressed.
Yeah, that's a pretty impressive piece of gear. Let's see. We got some more comments coming out of here. Poop talk time. Everybody was waiting for it.
It's gone downhill. Yeah.
David Gray is the coolest OG hiker and camper. Love his dogs. Can we talk about your dogs for a second? Because your dogs are the rock stars of your videos.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I get it. You know, you got it's Jaden and Bailey, and Jaden is actually spelled. Everybody spells it Jayden. It's actually Jaden, and he's been with me on every trip since the beginning. He's about I think he's 15 years old now, so he's been hiking since my first hike, and he's still knocking out the miles. But he's definitely well. And what's amazing about him is if you see him at home, his back legs, his muscles are almost gone in his back legs. He's had knee surgeries on both knees. He tore his ACL equivalent on both knees. I don't know if it was a genetic thing or whatever, but that was years ago, probably when he was, you know, probably close to 10 years ago. And the net result of how they had to fix that is I think it changed the geometry of his muscles. So his muscles have kind of atrophied. So his back legs he uses almost as like stilts when he walks. But when he goes on these hikes with me, he somehow manages to will himself to be about half the age that he is. So he just, if you've ever been down in the Chia Wilderness, the trip we just did, there's a stretch of rocks down there that are just nasty. I mean, just nasty for humans and just brutal for dogs. And he would get his legs stuck down in these holes and he'd dig himself out. And I mean, he just like wills himself to keep going because I think he lives to be out on the trails still, and he doesn't want to let me down. He doesn't want to let us down. And then Bailey is the chocolate lab. She's, I think, 6 now. So yeah, a lot younger, but she's the beast. And the personalities of the two are just as night and day as you can imagine. I mean, Bailey's like a Tasmanian devil. And I mean, she's got two energy positions, on and off, and there's like nothing in between. And Jaden is like the most mellow, gentle, sweetest dog ever. And the thing about him, and everybody who's ever hiked with him, I think Travis, the first time he hiked with Jaden is the dog that wants to make sure everybody's okay. And so like when I would hike in Colorado with Christian and my son, and he would get ahead of me and we'd kind of hike our own separate paces, Jaden would go back and forth between us, constantly checking to make sure that we're both okay. And the first time I hiked with Travis in the Dolly Sods, and he was getting some leg cramps, so he was lagging a little behind, Jaden kept going back to check on him, just to kind of make sure he was okay. And, he had somebody to hike with or whatever. So just greatest hiking dogs, and Jaden's getting to that point now where, I realize he's not going to be around a whole lot longer. And it, every time I think about it, it brings tears to my eyes, just thinking about not having him with me on these trips, but he's still knocking it off now.
As long as Jason Wish doesn't try and kill him, that's all that matters.
Yeah. No, that was backpacking with Jason.
Oh, that's right, Jason Waugh. That's right.
Jason Wish hasn't tried to kill him yet.
No,
so.
Jason Wish just tried to break your knee in the Adirondacks, right? Was that what it was?
Yeah. Well, Jason was long gone. He couldn't handle hiking the pace that I was doing. I was dragging everybody down, but yeah, he was with us on that trip. But he didn't hurt my knee. That was me.
We actually had somebody ask how your knee is doing.
It's good. Yeah, it's it was a torn meniscus. So, the funny part about that is it's one of those episodes that makes you realize, like, because I do a lot of hiking on my own, and I'm always kind of sensitive about, man, I don't want to get hurt here. This would be really bad. And it was one of those moments where it was like, man, if I had really messed this up bad enough that I couldn't have walked, I would have been taking the helicopter ride out of there. I mean, there was just no other way about it. And it was one of those moments where you start to realize that. And I carry the little satellite gizmo now. Realized that a few years ago, just hiking solo on some of these trips, you just, for safety's sake, you just kind of got to have that. But when I did that injury, it was kind of like what ended up happening was it was really steep. If you've ever hiked in the Adirondacks coming off the Gothics, it's an unbelievably steep descent the way we went. And my lower foot, it was like one of those spots where you kind of let your guard down because you were through the worst of it. And I let my lower foot kind of slipped underneath me. And my back foot was kind of stuck on the rocks. And I went into this like hurdler stretch, like elongated hurdler stretch, with my whole pack weight coming down on it. It's like, it kind of makes me cringe even thinking about it now. And I could feel it like, oh, that did not feel good. And so I'm sitting there, and actually we were with Justin Sylvester, It's Good in the Woods is his channel. And he goes, dude, that looked nasty.
I can hear him saying that too, man. I can hear him saying that.
Yeah, it was like, just right out. I was like, yeah, it was nasty. And I'm like, so I sat there for a second. I'm like, I don't know, and I got up, and it was like, man, I think I can still walk on this. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm okay. And it didn't swell up or anything. So I'm like, yeah. And I knew I could tell something was goofed up on it, but I could still walk. And so we walked the couple days to get out of there. And like it was, and I had a knee injury similar to that before that have actually healed up, so I go, okay, I give it enough time and it'll heal up. And the problem was, like 2 weeks later, it was getting better. I was riding my bike. I was doing spin class. I was doing all the stuff I normally do. and I twisted on it somehow wrong.
Ooh.
Just going to bed. I was just getting ready to get in bed, and I didn't even think about it. And the pain I felt, so the little torn part of the meniscus, which may have actually healed, I think it was still intact and in place. It got into a bad spot of the knee, and it's what they call a bucket handle tear. I've learned a lot about meniscus tears, and anybody who's had one probably knows what I'm talking about. But it's the meniscus looks kind of like a crescent moon, and I had torn like the upper part of it. And what happens with a bucket handle tear is it that's dislocated and makes it look like a bucket, right? So it's got a handle and a bucket, and the handle portion of it had gone into a part of my knee, the joint of my knee, and I couldn't straighten my knee out anymore. And the pain was just incredible. And the worst part was it never went away, and I couldn't straighten my knee out entirely. So I couldn't sleep real well, so my knee's kind of like cocked the whole time I'm trying to sleep, and you would fall asleep. And so your knee would naturally relax, and then the pain would wake me up. And so that went on. So I got it, the whole process of going into the orthopedic surgeon, and then goes, they take x-rays and looks like something here. We got to get an MRI. So then you got to wait. And this is all in the days of COVID, right? So everything takes longer. Then I go get an MRI. Then you got to go back to the orthopedic surgeon. He says, yeah, you got this hand. And he shows me all the beautiful pictures of how messed up my knee is. And then on top of that, oh, by the way, you're really old and you've got arthritis in both knees. So it's like, the beautiful part of that whole process is you get these wonderful high resolution pictures of how messed up your knees are after, 50 years.
I had a knee injury in January, and same thing. Like what it was for me, we were hiking up the area where you guys were when you went to the Red River Gorge with these guys, and we're hiking along the Sheltowee Trace, and we hit there's like a boulder sitting in the middle of the trail. So I walked up on it, jumped off. And when I jumped off, I landed funny and jammed my knee. Oh. And I remember like it made a weird noise and adjusted strange.
Never good, man.
And the guy who's hiking with me, he looks at me and he goes, that didn't look good. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm okay. I'll walk this off. And so we hiked another 8 miles, I think 9 miles or something like that. After that, and got to camp, and I told him, I said, if I wake up in the morning and I look at you and say I'm done, I'm done. And so I woke up the next morning and looked at him. I was like, I'm done, dude. And we ended up hiking 2 miles out to the cars, and I ended up going home. They honestly, I got an MRI done on it, and the first guy who read it said I had a torn meniscus. And then when I went and looked at it, the doctor played with my knee for a while, and he goes, does this hurt? And I said, no. And he touched something else, and that's what hurt. He said, that's not your meniscus. And he basically told me, he said, when how have you ever jammed a finger?
Yeah.
He said, you did that to your knee.
Okay. So it'll heal.
And he said, yeah. So he said, you got to just stay off it for about 6 weeks. And so but I found out the same thing you did. He goes, yeah, you have some arthritis in your knees. I was like, yeah. Awesome.
Well, and I had always, the sounds, I'm older than most of the folks out on the trail. So, my knees have gone through a lot of wear and tear in 6 decades or whatever. And, so I knew that, when the sounds my knees make, like when you go to the bathroom in the morning, it's like, but the good news of the whole thing is, and so they said, yeah, you got some arthritis in there. But the good news is the weight bearing cartilage is healthy. Yeah. So yeah, my knees will make some noises when you're bending them and all that. But in terms of just the weight bearing stuff, like when you're, just standing, I'm in no pain when that happens. And so, as long as I kind of take it easy and try to keep the pack weight down and everything, I think I still got some years in me.
Oh yeah. Well, I know it's that sound of like walking on cereal. That's what I always compare it to. Like if you were walking on a thing of Cheerios, that's what my knees sound like when I straighten them out sometimes.
I know that sound. Yeah.
Both of you guys had your backpacks on when you had those knee problems, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I sure did, yeah.
So David, I'm pretty sure that you bring, I don't know about now, you're talking about keeping the pack weight down, but the trip that we went on, I mean, it was easy trail. Like you had a good sized tent, you had pads for the dogs, so you bring a lot of extra.
Oh yeah, for the doggies. Yeah.
What kind of pack is that? Not on our trip, but whenever you hurt your knee.
I was using an REI Flash 55 pack that trip. I had always used a Z-Packs Arc Blast pack, and I loved it. Going back to like that's the thing is the Shill brothers always look at all my Z-Packs gear and they call it museum pieces because it's like kind of like when they were working out of their garage and Joe was kind of sewing everything by hand, I guess, or something. That's the vintage of my Z-Packs gear. But the strap on one of the shoulder straps broke in such a way that no way could be repaired. And it happened like 2 days before we left for the Yellowstone trip in 2019. So we have an REI store here in Indianapolis. So I literally drove, I was walking the dogs at this local trail. And so I drove from that trailhead parking lot straight to REI. And Travis he'd always had a REI Flash 55 pack. So he swore by it. So I just bought one of those for that trip. And then it was like, it weighs a lot more. It weighs like over 3 pounds, maybe 3.5 pounds, and compared to like a pound for that Z-Packs pack. But it was like, man, it carries a weight just great, and it has like millions of pockets in it. So I loved, and it was huge. I could have fit my Arc Blast pack inside that REI Flash 55 pack. And so I loved all that. But then after that Adirondacks trip, I just realized, man, I got to do whatever I can do to cut back on some of my body weight as well as my pack weight. Because I remember it was Goat picked up my pack and he goes, "What do you got? The 2 dogs in there too?" Or something like that. And they were all, I mean, like Jeremy was on that, All Things Outdoor was on that trip, and he had this like little like the little backpack the kids take to school, like with their books in it. So that was his pack for the whole trip. And I'm sitting there with this ginormous, like 60s style monstrous pack trying to climb up that Ninja Warrior thing that was out there. The place was unbelievable. But that trip convinced me, and everything that was going on with my knees, like I gotta shed a few pounds somehow.
Jeremy told me whenever I went backpacking with him, he was telling me about y'all's trip, and he was like, "Man, David really messed up his knee," and he was telling me, "Dude, you were like walking down with a giant pack down these super steep trail."
Yeah, they had like cables in spots you have to hold on to keep yourself from sliding down that stuff. It was crazy.
Well, he said your pack was heavy, man. Like,
it was.
I don't know how.
Well,
like 50 pounds maybe.
Yeah,
like,
the stupid part about that was I was expecting it to be really cold, because like Adirondacks and early season and all that, and it was not cold. But I brought all this extra clothes and everything so I wouldn't get cold. And yeah, that wasn't good. It wasn't good planning on that trip. And I didn't know he had planned the whole trip, and I hadn't done a whole lot of homework in advance, so I didn't have any idea what we were getting into. He had like trained 3 weeks in advance and got rid of lost 10 pounds to get ready for the trip, and I'm just kind of like doing my normal thing. And I'm thinking, it's New York, man. How hard could it be? It's not like Colorado or anything. Well, if you ever go to the Adirondacks, I wouldn't look at it that way. That was some real hiking there, man.
Well, you've got some serious trail cred because of it, man. I mean, you jacked your knee up and still did it. That's pretty impressive.
Well, I think you get out there in some places and it's like, you get out there, it's like, well, I'm either going to get airlifted out of here or I'm going to walk out. So
yeah,
it gives you some proper motivation, I think.
100%.
So David, we've got to spend a lovely hour, a little bit more actually together. So before
wow. Sorry to run you guys over. I don't know if you have to pay extra for that.
Yeah, our rent. The rent
put more quarters in the streaming video thing.
Yeah, our studio rent is really expensive, so we'll have to pay for that.
Fun. It's been fun, guys. Thank you guys for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Anytime. And I wanted to give you a minute to spread the word about where people can check out your photography and your videos and anything else that you're up to.
Okay. Well, I don't know what my backpacking channel is called. It's just David Gray, but if you search for David Gray backpacking, you'll definitely find it. And there's actually, if you look in the little channel banner, there's little things you can click on. There's a Smug Mug thing, which is where all the pictures are, or Instagram. So I think on there, I don't remember everything I've got on there, but I know there's a Smug Mug link and an Instagram link. So you can find this stuff out there. I'm on Instagram, davidgray.photography. My daughter, Annie, takes care of most of that for me. There you go. At David. So that'll get you the Instagram. And then it's, I think it's smugmug.davidgray grayc.com or something like that. I don't know. You'd find it, but the links in the banner, you'll see the little social media links in the banner on the YouTube channel. But yeah, check it out.
That's awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for being on tonight, man. If you want to hang out in the green room for a little bit, the M&Ms will be waiting for you.
Yeah, those virtual M&Ms. I really enjoyed those, by the way.
I
was looking for them. I'm trying to click on them to get them to show up, but nothing ever showed up. So I'm going to go get my own M&Ms here. So
all right. Well, if you hang out there, we'll be with you in just a second, man.
All right.
Awesome.
Cool.
We'll see you.
Thanks. See you.
Every time, man. I love these guests. This is just fun every single time, man.
Pleasure.
Every single time.
Different looking at his photography too. That was very interesting,
man.
in hearing some of the stories.
Yeah, it was really, I mean, just some of those shots were epic. I mean, we're all like, we do YouTube channels, you know, for people listening to the podcast, we do the podcast. We also do YouTube channels, and I try to do photography, and
it's hard.
I mean, there are probably third graders that take better pictures than I do. You know, it's just like, I'm not as good at that as he is. It's amazing. The stuff was just great. So Jeremiah, we got some great guests.
Yeah, I was going to say next week, speaking of photography, I don't know how many people have heard of Dave Morrow, but he spends more time in the woods than pretty much anybody I've ever met. And I love it. Every time I email him, I get an auto reply back that's something along the lines of, I'll give you the short version. I can't wait to help you and get back with you. Most likely I'm in the woods right now. And I'm probably on a backpacking trip, and I'll be back as soon as I get back. I'll holler at you.
Yeah, and in his photography, again, just beautiful photos. I can't wait for people to see these next week. It's going to be awesome. And we've got 2 great guests the 2 weeks after that. So we got some stuff lined up for you guys. It's going to be really good. And a reminder, if you are not subscribed to the Backpacking Podcast YouTube channel, you will not be able to watch these videos or hear about. You'll be able to watch them, but you won't know when they're coming because you won't get any notifications. So you guys need to go over there and subscribe. As soon as we get off here, go subscribe and hit the notification bell so you guys can continue watching these after June, because when June hits, these aren't going to be on our channels anymore, are they, Jeremiah?
No, it's all going to be on the Backpacking Podcast, and we can interact with everybody in the comments. So if you haven't watched the live stream yet, make sure you're here. Make sure you're checking it out. Comment. We can show your comments on the screen for those that are just listening, and you get to interact with the guests. So it's always a good time. Thank you, everybody. See the Pizza Ninja. Amazing show. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Doc Watson's always up for a good time. Great night.
Oh, yeah.
Photography, amazing. Just walking. Good show, fellas. Thanks. Absolutely. Our pleasure, man. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I've had a great night.
So have I. So, Jeremiah, for myself and for you, everybody have a great night.
Adios.